thank you very much, Evan, for your kind introduction and for having me. I look forward to showing you how the newest behavioral technology can support both asset managers and advisors. So when people learn that behavior quant is based in Vienna, they often ask about Sigmund Freud. And I will tell them one of Freud's favorite jokes. It's about a husband who cheerfully tells his wife, should one of us die, I could still move to Paris. So I want to show you how this joke gets to the very heart of investing, and we'll return to it soon. But before that, let me briefly talk about metaphors. In my research at Harvard, at MIT, I worked with dozens of Wall Street institutions, from Merrill Lynch to Goldman Sachs. And I realized that when these professionals talk about the markets, when they talk about how they make decisions, they use metaphors. And these metaphors show that they understand the markets very differently, what the market means to them and how they make decisions in this market. So, for example, for some professionals, the market unconsciously is a machine, and it shows in their language. For example, they would talk about the mechanics of trading, and currencies turn into the fuel for the engine of the market. So these quotes reflect what the market means to these professionals and how they make decisions. And here the market is a perfect and reliable system. It has fixed rules. It has built-in mechanisms. It has inputs and outputs that are predefined and that are predictable. And this market has no feelings. So it's best to be detached yourself and have no feelings when you interact with this market. Here you see something quite different. Here you see the market as a war. It is a minefield. It is a dog-eat-dog world where you go out to kill. Making decisions in the market as a war means there's a constant threat. People fight for their lives. It's about self-defense. It's about survival of the fittest. It's about being strong, and being fearless is crucial. And you can use any weapons because moral rules do not apply. Last example of such an unconscious metaphor, here's the market as a living being. In this market, factors emerge that make the market nervous. Or professionals talk about emotional involvement that gets much too deep and where you get married to a position. So remember, these are verbatim statements of top professionals. In the market as a living being, this means here's a living organism that follows its own rules. It thinks independently, it reacts emotionally, and to predict it, you need to read its mind and you need to use empathy. And you're in a relationship that can get highly emotional. So we see that professionals, without being aware of it, have very different unconscious notions of the market. And these images fuel how they decide. You don't find these metaphors, you don't find these images in textbooks about finance because they are personal and they're highly psychological. But these metaphors also help us answer the two questions that I always get when I work with financial institutions. First question is, how do my customers really think? How do they tick? And second, why is the performance of professionals in the very same asset class so different when everybody has access to exactly the same information? These questions, I think, point to a core problem of the entire financial industry. Systematic and measurable knowledge about the people making investment decisions is missing. It's missing about professionals and it's missing about clients. And that has costly consequences because it leads to customers who leave their advisors, customers who leave their banks. We know that 5 to 7% of customers leave their bank every year, year after year. It leads to underperformance. We know that over 30% of the returns of active fund managers depend on their behavioral traits. So with the wrong traits, they give away 1/3 of their returns. It also leads to poor manager selection. As many of you know, when allocators select fund managers, many of the risks involved are not visible. So managers who score high in the dark triad of personality underperform others by 33%. So these behavioral risks of professionals can lead to huge losses. Remember Bernie Madoff? But systematic insight is also missing about customers, of advisors, and of banks, really about anybody who makes financial decisions. So fortunately, behavioral finance has started to provide us with insight about the psychology of investors. These insights have been driven largely by economists. And given that they're economists, these are insights about investors in general. For example, we know that investors generally suffer from various decision biases, such as overconfidence. Returning to Freud's joke, this joke has the greatest relevance for the investment world. It's an example of overconfidence. This husband is overconfident. He's sure that he and not his wife will survive and move to Paris, like so many professionals who overestimate their investment abilities and their own skills. And like Swedish car drivers, where 90% rated themselves as above average drivers, something that, of course, is impossible merely on statistical grounds. But we can learn about investors from people explaining their car accidents. Here are some verbatim statements from insurance firms. An invisible car came out of nowhere. It stuck my car and vanished. Or a pedestrian hit me and went under my car. So we see there's a very important reason for overconfidence. People attribute their failures externally. They blame the environment, or they simply had bad luck. So when investors make random profits, they think it is because I'm a genius. So here's what we found in my own research with hundreds of Wall Street traders. 75% of these traders think they are more successful than their peers. Only 1 in 20 think they are less successful. So we have a ratio of above average to below average traders of an impressive 14-1. And here you see a king and a queen with their symbols of power and wealth, and they are dancing with death. It's a painting by 15th century master Notkin. And Notkin didn't know anything about today's investors, but he knew something about overconfidence. The empress says, I'm young, I'm the empress after all. I thought I had power. I never even guessed death, was coming, or that anybody at all could touch me. To which death replies, Empress, you have far overrated yourself. It seems to me my existence has slipped your mind. The time is ripe. So behavioral finance has identified psychological forces that generally influence investors. For example, overconfidence. But what about specific individuals? What about this client or that professional? How can we take the next step? And how can we predict individual investment behavior? This is where the new behavioral technologies come into play. Here's a video from our research with thousands of investors. And you see that each of these colored dots that you see is one individual investor. It's about how this investor processes information and how this investor makes investment decisions. And you see that each dot has a different position in the behavioral universe. And this means each investor is different from the others. And now let's take a close look at one of these dots. Let's take a look at one single investor. Already Freud said we cannot see the structure of a crystal on the outside. We have to open it to see its invisible structure. So let's examine this investor's structure. The structure is made up of his invisible psychological, his invisible behavioral aspects. Simply think about yourself. Think about how you are different from other investors. You have a different personality and you have very different preferences. You have a unique way of how you process financial information, how you turn information into investment decisions. You have unique traits that are specific to you that support good investment outcomes. And you have your own personal values and your own goals with your money. You're affected by decision biases, and you may have certain weaknesses, and these biases will affect your investment outcomes negatively. You have your own way of how you take risk and how you react to market volatility. So it's really the combination of all these aspects that determines how you make investment decisions. And these aspects are usually completely invisible. But if we can make them visible, then we have something that's highly predictive of your future behavior and your outcomes. So the question is, how can we bring to light this invisible structure? The answer, we need a highly systematic, we need a highly quantitative approach, we need behavioral science, and we need machine learning. So let me briefly tell you about behavior quant. It's the advanced technology that generates predictive behavioral profiles of investors. The technology is fully automated, which means that users can easily analyze any client, any investment professional, or even any investment team. They receive immediate results, predictions, and support for their decisions. How does the technology work? It's fully automated software. It's in the cloud. It's turnkey. You simply use your browser to log in, and it's easy to use. There's no need to know the latest research in behavioral finance. You simply use the system to invite any person, any team. The system will send them an email. They click a link in their email, and they're automatically guided through a series of questions and decision scenarios. So we worked with some of the leading universities, many of the leading psychometric centers to develop this survey. It's gamified, it's interactive. As soon as a person has finished the interaction, you see their detailed profile and you receive their predictions in an online dashboard. The system is hard to game because it doesn't take answers at face value. All these questions, all the questions in the system are only stimuli. And as you go through these questions, you react to stimuli in your own individual way. The system then compares your pattern of reactions with thousands of other patterns that we have in the database to determine your results in a fairly reliable and much more objective way than other systems can do. So what are the results you can get? Let me start with behavior quant for advisors. Imagine you're an advisor, and I know that many of you are. So here you are with your client. This may be a new prospect, or maybe it's somebody you've worked with for many years already. You will see this client's risk-taking values and the portfolio mix that matches this specific client. But the system also lets you tailor your relationship, tailor your communication to this specific client. You see the client's personal style, you see his investment goals, you see his expectations of you, you see any changes in the client's satisfaction, you see how the client makes decisions and how he reacts to volatility. As an advisor, you also see predictions about the client's future investment behavior. For example, here's a prospect who will be a very valuable client because the system predicts that he will be highly willing to invest. He will invest frequently, and his price sensitivity is low. So let's make sure we keep him. And these predictions are precise. For example, take customer churn, one of the predictions the system makes. We know that without these predictions, advisors often have no clue about who will leave them. And then at the end of the year, they receive a surprise letter. The client has left already, and yes, please transfer my money. So advisors, banks usually cannot predict such departures. It's more like tossing a coin. We saw that with hundreds of clients, the prediction accuracy with the behavioral data from Behavior Quant, we improved it from 50% random to over 90%. Advisors also receive recommendations for tailoring the advisory relationship. So the system will translate the results into concrete, actionable recommendations. What does that mean for me as an advisor? For example, here with Charlie, you should quickly contact him when markets become volatile. Why? Because he's highly emotional in his decisions and he's vulnerable to stress. The technology also lets advisors or banks segment all their clients. So this way you can easily identify groups with similar needs and similar interests. So there's valuable business intelligence at your fingertips. For example, you can look up which of my clients have the highest churn risk, the risk of leaving you. So you can talk to them before they leave. Why should advisors care? Why should they use this kind of support? There's a recent study by Charles Schwab that compares advisory firms that use behavioral finance with those that don't, and finds that advisory firms that use behavioral finance gained 3 times more new assets from existing clients. The reason? A much better customer experience and a much higher customer satisfaction. There's a survey by the Investment and Wealth Institute where advisors report that with behavioral finance, they manage client expectations better, they manage short-term emotional decisions better, and they are better in keeping their clients invested during times of volatility. Let's move from advisors to asset managers. How can BQ support investment teams? Asset managers can systematically enhance their team's performance. They receive completely new data about the team and about its participants. For example, Behavior Quant identifies the team's unique competencies and the team's strengths. You can see in detail the team's weaknesses and biases. You can anticipate how the team takes risks in different market conditions. And you see how members interact to make decisions. And by the way, in high-performing investment teams, these decision styles are diverse, so members can process market information more fully, and they can react more quickly to changing markets. You can see the team's strengths, and you can see where each individual member stands. And very importantly, you can identify weak spots, you can identify hidden biases, and you get strategies for how to counteract these weaknesses. So team members, each individual team members receives their individual report. They see their personal results, they see how they benchmark against other professionals. The report identifies their unique strengths, their biases, and it provides them with improvement recommendations for their decision processes. These recommendations are based on your individual results. And why should asset managers consider debiasing their decisions in the way that I described? There are studies that show that investors leave behind 1 to 4% returns each year due to biases such as overconfidence. And professionals are equally affected by some of these biases. Our own research with leading financial institutions underscores this. We compared top professionals with their average counterparts, and we found that behavioral aspects explain a large part of performance differences. And finally, here's how BQ support allocators. If you're an asset allocator, the technology supports your evaluation and your selection of fund managers. You can compare individual professionals one-on-one, and you can compare entire teams with each other. The system lets you explore in detail how the teams compare, and the system recommends the team that's most likely to outperform. How can it do this? Because its predictions are not simply based on past results, which can be random. They are based on how the team makes decisions, how it translates information into investment decisions. Now, that is something that predicts future performance. And that brings allocators measurable benefits. For example, fund managers who score high on the so-called dark triad lose 100 basis points in annual returns. For another example, the cost of bad hires among financial professionals estimates are 3 times their annual salary, so highly considerable. So let me summarize. These new behavioral technologies provide 3 main benefits. Advisors can easily establish tailored relationships with their clients. Asset managers can optimize their investment performance, and capital allocators can select the right fund managers. This medieval picture here nicely sums it up. You see a wanderer who peeks outside the visible world. It's like an investor who discovers the new universe of behavioral data. So we are thankful of the international recognition Behavior Quant and our behavioral solutions have received. And if any of this sounds interesting to you, I brought a special offer. This is for webinar participants. It's limited until end of September. If you go to the website of Behavior Quant, so behaviourequant.com, use BQ Momentum 2024 to receive a discount. You can use this code to analyze and to benchmark yourself, and you can use this code for your work with your clients. Here's the code again, BQ Momentum 2024. And this concludes our session. I'm Thomas Oberlechner. I would love to hear from you. Thanks very much for joining me.